start our live stream here with our two fantastic guests. Before I introduce them properly, I want to do a quick setting the stage, so to speak. AI today is, of course, the hot topic, and it feels a bit like it's standing where mobile was in 2010. Everyone knows it's changing the world, it's impacting us in many different ways, but very few actually know how to build around it. So, founders are asking themselves, what's real, what is hype, and how do we make AI a lever and not a distraction? So, today we're going to discuss exactly that topic with Adrian from Merantix. He's the founder and general partner there, where he invests in AI first companies. And of course, also with Nenad from Holycode, co CEO and CTO there, where they build tech solutions for fast growing companies. A very well welcome, Adrian, Nenad. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be
Pleasure
here.
being here.
So let's kick things off right away. And if anyone has questions for our two guests, just drop them in the comments and we can address them live during the session. If you look back at the past 12 months, what is one thing about AI adoption in startups that genuinely surprised you for the better or the worse? Let's start with you, Adrian, and then with Nenad.
Yeah, I think what's interesting, maybe not so surprising, but what's interesting is the number of companies in our portfolio that is growing with 50% month on month. That is really, really impressive. And at the same time, looking at the number of people they employ, a lot of them are sub 10 or sub 20 people, and still they show this tremendous growth, which of course is a testament to a lot of AI that they're using, not only in their core product, but also on their admin, finance, customer processes. So I think that is really impressive.
I love that. Fast growth and small teams with bigger impact. Nenad, what do you see in the startup world?
This is interesting what Adrian said. I would also look from another angle a little bit. What was kind of surprising for me is that, when the AI is becoming more powerful every day, right? And we saw that, or at least what I saw is that actually business side is trying to benefit from it as soon as possible. Try to cut costs, try to be fast, try to deliver stuff, optimize and so on. While it was going, at least from what I saw from the tech side, a little bit slower. So the tech persons and product were a little bit reluctant. Where can we use it? Does it really produce the quality we need? Wait a second, what about security and stuff like this? So I would actually expect that the tech part would be going faster because it's closer to them, the technology. So yeah, that was quite interesting, and I think now it's kind of evening up more or less because AI is really progressing fast, and then obviously the speed of the progress and the amount of tools that come out every day. This is something that is surprising me every day. I think it has
Definitely.
exponential growth.
For sure. Let's jump right into the topic. I want to start with stickiness, but also failure rate that has been much discussed over social and also the media. Adrian, you posted a LinkedIn post a while ago where you talk about your co-founder Rasmus's article. He wrote a brilliant piece about the switching costs in AI, and he's arguing that models are too easy to swap. And I wonder, how can founders then make their AI product sticky and also defensible when APIs are interchangeable and commoditization is basically accelerating and getting stronger and stronger? How do you make your product stick and different to not lose the strategic edge?
Yeah, I mean that's the number one question, obviously, both for a founder and an investor. You mentioned mobile and internet earlier, and I think very much in line with how these technologies would commoditize. We currently also see a very rapid commoditization of AI machine learning as a general purpose technology, which cannot and should not be the only angle how you're differentiating yourself, because everybody is catching up so quick. So it really comes down to a number of things that we look at. One is, what is the core value driver of your product, and how are you creating value at your customer? How can you create exponential value at your customer, and how can you capture a good part of this value that you create, which in essence is the definition of a business model, right? So it's value creation and value capture. How to be sticky, how to create these lock-in effects has a lot to do with how deeply integrated are you in the work and value chains of your customer. The more integrated you are, the harder it is for a client to rip you out and replace you with something else. So that is one of the number one factors, I would say, that really matters.
And what are we talking about here? I think in the article it's called designing for depth. Does that mean workflow integration or working with unique data that is not publicly available? What does that specifically mean to really have this deep integration?
Yeah, it's both. It's both. You want your customers to be deeply integrated in your tools. So you want to build as many workflows as possible. They go through you, which obviously also then has a very positive effect on the data side of things, because the more a client does in your tool, the more data you're also creating that is very proprietary, and you can then also use to build more services on top of that, because you have more knowledge about the business of your client as well.
And I encourage everyone to go and check out the article, because there you had a really nice visual overview of how deep you can go, and the deeper, the stronger the moat from a strategic perspective.
Yeah, we call
Nenad,
it complexity as a moat, right?
Exactly.
Good one.
I love that. Nenad, over to you. In a previous episode, in a previous live stream that we did, you described AI as being a leverage that people will not actually work less. They will probably even work more than before, but generate more output with the same time input, so to speak. And what do you see there from the builder seat? Are we actually seeing that leverage play out, or is it still, as some media outlets portray, also a lot of hype and just not real productivity gains out there? What do you see?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of news in both directions there when you read online. And but from let's say my own experience and experience from our own teams and the people I talked to, I mean, there is definitely a gain already. I mean, much more than a year ago, let's say, and it's actually really. It really works well when it comes to simpler tasks, like smaller chunks of things that AI has to help you with. And let's say the smaller projects or proof of concept or MVPs, and especially where it works quite well if it's like a single man show project, like when one person works on it. Obviously it becomes quite difficult, much more difficult when you work as an organization, because then you need to synchronize, you need to watch out not to step on each other's toes. You need to make sure that you don't rewrite what other people are writing with AI. So definitely there are gains, but it's still like I think every day there are new tools coming out, and you really always have to challenge your processes and try to see, okay, does the one that I have now fit still the best to my needs, or do we need to change that? So I would say there are benefits, but it's not like that you can just give it to AI and say, build me the product. That doesn't work.
Not yet. What are the clearest examples that you see today? Like, for example, do you use cursor in development and you can develop 3 to 4 times faster? What is a specific example where you actually see the AI benefit today in your work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one clear example, or we started benchmarking actually internally different parts of software development, let's say, different stages. And where we see the clear gain is, for instance, QA automation, especially when it comes to end-to-end testing. Just one example, this was like, it was presented in the company a month ago. We had 16 cases that we wrote manually in 2 hours, 45 minutes or something like this. And with AI, it was 35 minutes, exactly the same cases, exactly the same quality, which is really amazing. But yeah, it's a really like a small chunk that you give to AI with the clear instructions, and then it really works well. Then, for instance, we have something we call product discovery, which is a pre-delivery phase where you talk about product, write down the backlog, the features, the requirements, and all of that. And this was usually around 5 to 6 weeks in the past. Now we are actually 2 weeks. And there, obviously, a lot of it happens with, for instance, research we do with Perplexity, there is then working on it was with ChatGPT. Then we capture the calls with Read AI. So we combine the tools, right? So that we get the results. And for instance, when it comes to Cursor, we used it now heavily on mobile development, and there we clearly saw like around 15 to 20% performance boost and increase in the organization, not a single man show, like working together with a couple of people.
Nice. So we do see clear results there that you just described. Nevertheless,
Exactly.
Adrian, there was a recently very much quoted MIT study that reported that 95% of the generative AI pilots failed to reach production. Why is that number so high? And what can founders actually do differently to land in the successful 5%, if these numbers are even accurate?
Yeah, I mean it's a high number, obviously, and you would need to dig into the methodologies of the study, how exactly they came up with that. I mean, first of all, to me, it's not a bad thing if experiments fail. I think it's also quite normal that more experiments fail than work out. So you just need to be quick enough to iterate. I think that's how I think about it. At the same time, obviously, a lot of times AI projects fail. It has more to do with organizational constraints and people than with the technology itself. Another factor usually is data consistency, data pipelines, data availability. So I see a lot of times in larger companies that they think they have a lot of data, but once you start to dig in, you realize, yeah, they have a lot of data, but it's nowhere near the data lake people would dream about. But instead, you're looking at very fragmented systems, APIs from different generations, sometimes no APIs, and then you start to actually build the infrastructure on which you then can build machine learning. But usually that infrastructure part already is quite a challenging one and requires very solid engineering, but also a lot of times organizational changes, procedural changes, and they need to happen. And whenever people are not on board with something like that, you can easily imagine how things then fail, because people just don't want to comply, don't want to change these procedures, they don't want to be part of that change. So I think a lot of times it has more human reasons than there is technological reasons when these type of projects fail.
And it's interesting. I heard a take on exactly the same study that basically said, well, this is probably true for the large corporates because of exactly these reasons that you mentioned, that they have a hard time putting the AI then into production because they don't know how, or they have all these constraints. But at the same time, it's a massive opportunity for startups because they can just figure it out and change course super fast. They don't need a board's consent to actually do something. Do you think that the success rate is probably much, much higher for startups and unlocking immensely new potential here?
I think so. This is the classical reason for disruptive innovation. Large organizations usually take much longer to adopt to something new because they also have a lot more legacy that they need to work on. And I think it's a cultural issue. I think when you look back on technological innovation, adoption speed never was a function of the availability of the technology, but more of the cultural ability and willingness to adopt and how quick that would go. And so I think, again, comparing to the internet era, you will see three categories of companies in this new AI era. You will see the new ones, the new players that emerge and then start to dominate the categories they created. And there's a lot of internet companies that before the internet era wouldn't exist and couldn't exist. And so the same way we think about AI as an investment thesis, there will be a lot new companies with business models that without AI wouldn't even be able to exist. Then you have the next category of an incumbent that starts to experiment and adopt AI into their business models and evolves along the technology into new spaces and business areas, and thus makes this transformation successfully. And then there's the third category of companies that will fail because they start too late, they wait too long, they have a lot of inertia and constraints and hurdles to actually deploy this technology. And therefore, the first incumbents actually I talked about, they will just take over.
Yeah, very, very nice perspective. Nenad, what do you see from the work with your clients? What is it that most teams get wrong operationally? Is it the data, the leadership part, or a lack of product focus? There are many things that Adrian mentioned before. What do you see with the work with your clients?
I mean, there's a lot of reasons. So now if I would have to cluster it somehow, I still go back to this, there is many times I see that there is too high of expectations towards the AI. So basically, like giving the big chunks to it. And then obviously there is a demotivation coming if it doesn't work, and then, okay, challenging, is it now what we are doing? Is it the right thing or not? So back and forth. So I think like that's what I see a lot. Obviously not be AI ready, which is what Adrian mentioned, which can be also AI ready in terms of the data structure, data quality, data volume that you have, but also from an organizational point of view, that everyone is ready to accept the new way of working and not just to try it because someone instructed them to try it and not follow them properly. Maybe also like many that I saw try to use one tool for everything, like either Claude or Chat or whatever it is, and then try to just stick to it. While in my opinion, you need to combine them. Actually, every tool has it's good for certain purpose, right? And then you have to combine them. So yeah, I think that's more or less it that I see.
And I now also want to talk a bit about talent and hiring, because obviously AI has a big impact also on how you build teams and build companies overall. You already mentioned at the beginning, Adrian, that now your teams are basically growing insanely fast with a very small team. Do you think that they will stay this way, that overall we will have much smaller teams also as the companies start to mature and scale up?
I think so. Because I think when you look at it, there's a very different type of DNA in these companies. So I think as you can organize the same workload around a smaller group of people, because so much more is automated, I think that will remain in the DNA of these companies. And so I would expect them to grow, because a growing business always also means there's more work, and there's also some things that will still be hard to automate, and especially all the customer-facing parts of the business, where it's also a lot about human nuances and understanding of someone's goals and business purpose. There will always be these requirements for human interactions. But in general, I would expect these companies to remain smaller, more efficient, and also scale quicker than the generation of companies before. Yeah.
What are sort of then the skill sets that you see in your companies, that you have in your portfolio and that you work with? What is sort of the skill set or the roles of the teams that these fast growing but small yet powerful companies have?
So I think it's around two areas. It's around serving a customer, understanding customer needs and how to serve them, and how to further develop the product to keep customers happy. And then the other part is actually building that product, right? Building the engine on the engineering side. And I think both requires very specific talents that have a lot to do with industry knowledge, with machine learning knowledge, And then I think a lot of the parts in companies around administration, finance, operations, even the regular customer interactions, customer service, there I see is a tremendous opportunity for automation also, and especially also these areas are the ones that grow less quick in terms of FTE.
Yeah. Very interesting take. Nenad, I also curious about your perspective, because let's say I have a startup, but maybe my team, it doesn't have the biggest AI knowledge, and now I know, okay, I want to build an AI company. I need to integrate AI into my offering, into my business model. How would you recommend me do it? Would you recommend to say, okay, develop fast, outsource it at first to prove, or would you recommend to go higher in probably a very competitive market for AI talent? What is the best way to go about this, to actually build these AI capabilities within my startup?
Sure. I mean, in general, I always think, especially when you start and before you validate the idea, that you should try to minimize your costs somehow, and let's say the responsibility for long-term setups and so on. And therefore, I would actually recommend always that if you are starting something, to try to find either an agency or a contractor or a freelancer or whoever did this already or was working in the past with similar, let's say, implementations or AI integrations, and try to leverage their knowledge. But obviously, you shouldn't move alone without AI skills. So you should find it somehow, either by getting a contractor or via agency, in my opinion, at the beginning. Because you still don't know if your idea will fly. You will commit to someone long term, maybe, and then you know what happens if this doesn't work. So you should limit your risks, I would say.
So then, not first you, and then maybe also Adrian's perspective. If you had to build a 5-person AI startup team, what roles, what people would you get on board? What would each of these members do?
So first me, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, so definitely, as I mentioned, I would like to have the AI skills somehow. So probably that would be part of the team, be it like in-house or external. Then there was we also mentioned before, there is also a complete aspect of the architecture, data, hosting, security, and so on. I would actually definitely have someone with such skills, maybe combined in 2 people, or if not, one. And obviously there is still the business part, so I think we should not neglect that. So if we build something that's just a tool, if no one is using the tool, it's just a tool, right? So it doesn't have the product value really. And I think the business part should also have we have to have someone responsible for sales and marketing for sure, and then someone to run the operations. So definitely that would be for me the mixture.
The first role you mentioned, Nenad, is AI knowledge. What would that role be? What would the skill set that this person brings to the table exactly be? Can you pinpoint it to a background or a specific job title that you would give that person?
Yes, exactly. I mean, if I look for my own teams, when I hire people in this area, I prefer people who actually had a lot of touch with the data science in the past, and actually were working with AI much before this whole generative AI came out, and obviously agentic. So AI existed even before, with neural networks, and AI is actually think while machine learning is learn. So like people who can combine these 2 things together, and on top of that had experiences with the modern tools, that would be someone that I would be looking for.
Nice. Adrian, do you agree with Nenad's team assembly, or would it change anything?
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think there's generally these 2 areas, right? One is the technical area, and the other one is the business sales area. On the technical side, I would probably say it's about engineering and product. So not only how you do things, but also how you then make them fit into your client's business, which is the product role, which I think is very, very important.
Agree.
And on the business side, obviously, you want to have deep domain expertise and go-to-market expertise. The one thing I would add, when we look at our teams, when you look at the companies we build, it's typically at the crossroads or the convergence of different domains coming together. Think of tech bio, think of healthcare, life science, cybersecurity, fintech companies that we're building. It often is a mix of people with strong engineering backgrounds, and then it is someone with a biological or chemistry background, with a very technical background as well, that joins the engineering team, and together they build these rather complex products. Because usually when you have a machine learning background, you did not necessarily dabble your time in biology or chemistry, and so you need to bring these people together.
I love that. So that's probably even stronger than before in the old days, so to speak, that you need to have this strong combination of really deep domain knowledge combined with engineering and AI capabilities. And that together generates an even bigger leverage compared to just doing software as it used to be before the AI time.
Yes, because that's also what the big models aren't necessarily really good at.
Yeah.
At least right now, right? So just because a deep understanding of chemistry usually, or biology, usually still relies on a lot of proprietary data that these large models not necessarily have a direct access to. They're not just available in the public for training. So that's also where we then build a lot of proprietary IP around not just the data, but also around processes and how things are done.
Yeah, it's beautiful
That's also, by the way, why a lot of the, at least in our portfolio, and I think it's a common theme in the market, a lot of the machine learning AI companies in these complex domains that I just mentioned before, they oftentimes don't file a lot of patents. Because if you file patents in machine learning, you need to basically publish how you do things.
Yeah.
And once you do that, it's also quite easy to find a way around and just do something slightly different and still get to the same result, right?
Yeah. Also, interesting thing that we hear on the market is actually that now the companies that are actually providing data sources are really being on demand. Like the big players like Claude, Chat, and all others, they now actually ask on the market if you can provide code written by human that they can learn from, and so on. So it's really not only that, but also from other areas, not just coding. And I think this is becoming the new thing, where to get the data which was created by humans so we can train on.
And there I actually do have a follow-up question. I think I saw it yesterday. There was a short video on YouTube where I think it was Jason Calacanis, and I think he has like a personal feud with Sam Altman or something going on there. But he basically said, don't build on OpenAI. Through their API, they just measure everything that you're doing, and then if it's enough relevance, they just integrate it in their own product, and they basically steal your business. That's a bit simplified what he said. How do you see that, Adrian, from a strategic perspective? Like, how do you deal with that? You want to build on the existing models. You don't want to build your own model to a certain degree, but yet how can you then protect yourself from not being replaced by the big players?
Yeah, honestly, majority of the companies we invest in and we build, they build their own models.
Okay.
That does not necessarily mean it's completely built from scratch, but oftentimes it's very, very deep proprietary models that they build and continue to develop, at least for the key strategic parts. For things that are not strategic, you can use whatever is there available in the market. But otherwise, if you rely heavily on these models, then you do what we call a wrapper, right? And I think from an investment perspective, a wrapper company isn't something that is going to be interesting, because indeed, anyone that is below providing the whole infrastructure will be able to take over at some point if the business is interesting enough. And I wouldn't even say that is evil intentions. I think all platform players are playing this game and analyzing exactly what's happening in the layer above. And if it's interesting enough, they will think about moving upstream. That is why building a thin layered wrapper company is definitely not something that is interesting from an investment perspective.
Yeah, the wrapper company is a nice lifestyle business that you bootstrapped and tried to extract some money, but it's not an investor case.
Exactly, and that can be a fantastic business for someone to run, right? And the market also might be way too small for any of the big players to move in. So you're going to do that forever. Great. But it's not going to provide the venture type returns.
Another big topic these days is we always hear, oh, we are in an AI bubble. AI startups get funded with crazy amounts in extremely short time frames. They raise one round, 3-5 months later, they raise the next bigger round. It feels a bit like a crazy time. Are we in an AI bubble, Nenad?
Yeah, I think definitely a bit, I would say. I mean, nowadays almost everyone puts AI on the pitch deck, otherwise they cannot go in front of the investors, right? I always say, AI is not the solution for everything. And I think the investors, I mean, we see now thinking from Adrian, investors are quite smart and they understand technology. I'll always say that, AI is not a solution for everything because there was automation before AI. You can still use the principles from the old-fashioned automation, let's say, and only use AI where it really makes sense. And also, I think when you look at it from the investor's perspective, we need to have a strong, or startup has to have a strong moat, as we just said, and by just building something on top of the models that we also discussed now, it's not going to win the investors anymore, right? And I think the biggest potential or the most success will have the companies that combine, let's say, the hardware and the software together, because that, in my opinion, is at the moment probably the strongest moat you can get. I mean, I don't know how Adrian sees that, but that's why we see a lot of expansion in robotics, in IoT now, in combination with AI, because then you have something stronger that it cannot be replaced easily.
Yeah, let's ask the investor, how do you see it?
Look, if there is something we can learn from the history of economies, it is when it looks like a bubble, when it feels like a bubble, it usually is. Word of caution, though, no bubble is ever the same. So it's going to be very difficult now to say, yeah, that's exactly the way this will unfold. I would say there is probably a lot more local bubbles than there is a bubble like it was in the earlier mentioned internet era, where you had the .com bust at some point, where literally everything tanked because it was mostly built on fantasy. And I think that is very different today when you look at the AI markets. There's a lot of business going on. There's a lot of value created. There's a lot of demand. So the adoption is very quick. Yet when you look at valuations, some seem quite crazy. And I think one of the challenges is human thinking works very linear. And now a lot of these very, very large valuations are based on some projections of the business into the future. And we always know that things turn out to happen very different from what we expect and understand. And so I would say when you look at infrastructure as an example, NVIDIA, really great company. I think they did get a lot of things right. Are they value 5 trillion US dollar, 5,000 billions? Well, based on the current projections, they are. At the same time, is the market for chips and compute going to be a high-end market only, Or will there be a mid and a lower tier of compute that is also going to emerge, and that is probably going to be served by new companies that will take some of the share? Yes, I also do believe so. So I would say yes and no. Are we in a bubble? Some things definitely are very bubbly, and when you get pre-seed companies that raise hundreds of millions or billions, then certainly that raises some, or should raise some question marks, because we have been there in the past, and even a couple of years back, we thought the markets would go on forever, and then 2022 was a very painful moment in venture capital markets. So I think we're going to see some of the expectations not being met, which again I also think is very normal. But it's not going to be all wins in this market. Let's put it that way.
I wonder, how do you do that as an investor? Because I imagine from a founder's perspective, these founders come and they say, AI is the hot topic. I can ask for crazy valuations. You as an investor, you have a really conflicting goal. You want to get into the hot deals, but you also don't want to overspend on crazy valuations, because then you probably never see a return on these. How do you balance that? Because I imagine that to be a very difficult spot to be in from an investor's perspective.
Yeah, I think there is also, of course, a view or a question: what type of investor are you? Are you a multi-stage investor, follow on for quite long, and also have very, very deep pockets? We're seeing a few funds that have billions under management. They are multi-stage, so they enter and then they also follow on with the really big rounds. You have a very different calculation when you are multi-stage than when you are single stage. So we at the moment are pre-seed single stage. We follow on into seed rounds, but we always do our first check at the pre-seed round. And what I can say from how we operate is we are quite disciplined. So we have a sweet spot. We have a range of valuations that we think are a smart thing to do, and then that ends somewhere. And then usually we are also quite upfront and be like, hey, look, this is not going to work if you think you are raising a pre-seed round at 30 or beyond valuation. Then it's just not one for us. And you know, you're going to miss some of the opportunities, of course. But the way I think about it, and you know, I switched sides, right? So I've been a founder myself for a long time. So I've been sitting at both sides of the table, and I do, when I talk about this with founders, I do tell them, look, you should not think about this as a single event now, but you need to think of this as a several rounds game that you're playing. So when you now optimize valuation in this very first round and you get to a very high valuation, that is fantastic and great. And it also means you're going to have to live up the expectations that people will have in the next round, because the next round needs to be much, much bigger. And so the goalpost you're setting for yourself is also going to move up in line with that. And it might at some point then be difficult to live up to the expectations, because no matter, you can raise on a story and a great team at pre-seed. Some are able to also pull that off at seed. At Series A, latest, you need to have very strong traction and you need to show business numbers. And so these things have to go hand in hand.
Yeah, it sort of limits your options if you have a too high valuation, because then you can only go up or you're out, basically. So the options to say, maybe we grow a bit less fast or something like that, it's just less and less options the higher valuation you call for upfront.
I mean, I also had that case, one of the case in private investments. There was a down round afterwards,
Yeah.
which is not fun for everyone.
Painful.
I mean,
That's very painful for
Yeah.
everyone. Yeah.
But that's what you get when you are too optimistic or too aggressive in the first place.
But as you said, it's a fine line, and obviously we want to invest in founders that are crazy,
Of course.
and think big, right? Just we want them to be the right amount of crazy and the right amount of healthy, right?
Thin
And
line.
humble. It's a very thin line.
Yeah. Let's also talk a bit about the future. I'm interested in both of your perspectives. Maybe start with Nenad. Where is AI actually going in the next, let's say, 2 to 3 years? I know it's a very big question, very difficult to predict, but what is your best guess today in November 2025?
We discussed that a lot, actually. I think no one, if you ask many people, there will be very different answers. I think no one can actually really predict because this goes super fast. As I said, the things are popping up every day, and you need to constantly just challenge your whatever you do. Like every week, you need to challenge. Okay, do we need to change stuff? Is something new coming out? Are we ahead of the curve, or are we already behind? And so on. The best guess that I have is that obviously AI is technology that will stay with us, and I still really believe that because all the companies that I know and where I was part of, we and I think all others, not just my companies, were all of us, we have huge backlogs. So that means two things. Or it could mean two things. Either we are not producing enough at the moment with our own capacities, or we have things in the backlog that we really don't need. They just lay down there, right? And we wrote them. I actually think it's the first one. And I really believe that AI will actually help us to maybe at some day close down our backlogs. Will be really close to actually doing most of the things we planned. And I think this actually it increases the capacities on delivery teams, but also on the sales, product, operations, and so on, because this is really linked to each other. So I really think it will become like even more part of our daily life, and there will be much more new, let's say, profiles and positions being developed with the AI that people will work on in the future. And I think we just have to be to stay ahead of the curve and see what's going on. It's very difficult to predict all the details.
For sure. What's your take, Adrian?
Yeah, I think a lot of this year has been around agentic AI. I think that is definitely going to continue because there is still, I would say, we're at the first percent of what's possible. But if you ask me about what are new themes that might be relevant, I think one of the beliefs we currently have, and we also wrote a bit about that a couple weeks back, is interfaces. I think it becomes increasingly important and interesting how the interface between AI, machine learning, and the human users is done. And a lot of it is not yet in a very efficient way. So a lot of it also is by design hard to make it efficient. And I think there's one easy prediction and there's one a bit more crazy prediction that I could make. So, I mean, the easy one is audio as an interface is going to be increasingly more important because it's more efficient than the previous ways to interface with technology. And there's a lot that is coming around because these models have become so strong. So you're going to communicate. You're going to talk with technology a lot more in the future. The thing that is a bit crazier, obviously, but also I think no longer in a too distant future, is the neuroscience connection. So the mental connection with technology. That doesn't necessarily need to be invasive. You're planting a chip into your head so you can only think about something and then it happens. But we're also increasingly seeing that consumer technology around brainwaves getting more and more advanced and being able to translate into actionable results. And I think there's a huge array of applications that you can think of where this will play an integral and really, really important role. And I'm very keen to see that coming around. Second part of my answer would be, there's a number of industries we are very excited about when it comes to the potential in adopting AI. So increasingly, you're going into the hardware world, into the robotics world. We're still at the very early inning of where robotics is going to go. So that's one area that we think is going to be extremely interesting to watch and for us also to invest in. Another area that I think is maybe a bit overlooked is fintech infrastructure in fintech markets. So we've seen the past 10 years a lot of innovation in fintech when it comes to consumer interfaces, the consumer layer. But when you look at the infrastructure that is powering the financial markets, it still is a very, very old type of technology. And having all these agentic and machine learning technologies at hand, you can start automating so much more of these still human labor tasks that dominate these infrastructure markets, that there is going to be a lot of new models, a lot of new opportunities coming up through that. And then maybe the third area we continue to be very excited about is biology. Biological systems are always incredibly complex, and machine learning is a fantastic tool to understand these complexities and then also start designing new things. And I'm not only talking about pharma, life science, but I'm also talking about materials as an example.
No, I love it. There's so much cool things that you just outlined here for us. And I'm sure we're going to do a recap probably together in like 2 years from now to see where we're standing. I think it's a really good framework to take with us.
Start betting now, and then we see.
Exactly.
Now, what I wanted to also maybe add quickly, what I see as something that is quite cool, and I think this also will have some future. At the beginning, with the models that came out, they, especially if you think now about the generative part, is that it builds something from scratch always. So if you ask stuff, hey, can you write me a code? It builds from scratch. If you ask, hey, write me the poem, the song, it starts from scratch. What we see, at least in technology, I see that now is that there are players coming out which...
We lost him.
Now we have lost
they built with the AI.
Nenad, we need your AI avatar next time. Now you're back. Yes.
Sorry, I don't know why I lost. So what I was saying, there are players that actually had like basic, like the ground infrastructure done with traditional way. And then on top of that, they combine with generative and AI to build on top. So which means if you start, let's say, building a platform, it already has authentication ready. It has the, let's say, the CRUD operations ready, the database and all the stuff. And it just builds on top what you need additionally. We saw that on the market with a couple of players. It's still not there where it should be. It works really great when you start, but when you need to adjust, it really doesn't work very well if you need to do the change request or whatever. But I think this will also be the future because it's much faster. You don't start from zero. And there are things that are tested, working well already. So you just add on top. So it's a combination of traditional and AI together in the generative space.
Very nice. Now I have just one closing questions for both of you. Let's start with you, Adrian. When all is said and done, I know we could probably go on for another 2 hours to talk about these topics, but what's the single best piece of advice that you'd leave founders who want to build with AI right here, right now?
It's not surprising when I say just do it. Stop thinking about it, do it, fail fast, fail early, learn from it, and then rebuild. I think with new technologies, with new opportunities, there's always so much in the unknown. No one has been there yet because it's all just unfolding in front of us. And the one thing I've learned about these moments in time and about these opportunities is the faster you start grabbing them, playing with them, the faster you start learning and then finding the right ways in. So don't wait, get it going.
I love that. Nenad, what is your one tip?
One tip, I would still stay with the whole mode thing. So I think about basically the mode so that you cannot just easily be replaced by the next version of GPT. I completely agree with what Adrian said. And I would just add, if you have an idea that you think it's completely crazy and you shouldn't look at it, it's far from being possible, this is probably something that you should try to pursue, because someone else will do it and then you will be behind. And it was your idea originally, right? So
someone very smart once said, if you're not scared about your idea, I'm paraphrasing now, the idea is probably not big enough, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You're not ambitious enough. I love that. It has probably never been a better time to build than right now. It's a really exciting time that we live in. Nenad, Adrian, thank you so much for your time and for your insights. I learned a lot. I really appreciate you coming here on the show today. And I'm sure we're going to catch up again very soon in this very rapidly evolving space that we're operating in. Thank you, guys.
Let's do that. Thanks a lot.